Please be seated. Good afternoon, councillors. Welcome to the Borough Council for the 8th of September 2022. Can I please ask all councillors to switch their mobile phones off or place them on silence, please? Councillors, most members will be aware of the recent death of former councillor David Walsh, who served on the authority from 1996 to 2019. Would members please join me in a minute's silence as a mark of respect? Thank you, councillors. Please be seated. Would any councillors like to say a few words in remembrance of Councillor Walsh? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to the members across the council that attended Dave's funeral. I think all will agree it was a fitting send-off. Dave was one of the most remarkable men I've ever met. Character. I remember my first experience in all of this was sitting in a Labour group when I agreed to be candidate and watching this guy sit at a chair, and for 3 hours I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. He was talking about the budget of the council, and I just like to thank Dave, wherever he is looking down, for all the years he dumped himself down in our conversations with us. I know from the Labour group we'll never replace him. He was a character like I've never met before. To hear so many experiences of people from around the country at his funeral was breathtaking, to see what an impact he had on people across the country. So thank you very much for Mary, the Mayor, and everybody else who attended his funeral.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Lanigan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And it was an honour to be there at his funeral. Dave and I, although we didn't always agree politically with what he did, he was one of the most intelligent people that I've ever met. And I would go to him for advice when I came on the council and through that. And he was always absolutely willing to listen and not actually say to me, you should do this, Mary. What he used to say was, have you thought about that? And going forward with it. And you're right, he's going to be absolutely greatly missed. His funeral was amazing, and I think it brought out the character of the man. And I think had he been looking down on us, he would have liked that, and maybe had a few chuckles on the way with what was said there. But you're right, he will be absolutely missed, and missed by the councillors in this chamber and everyone who knew him. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Regrettably, I couldn't attend his funeral, I was away, but I had the greatest respect for him, who was my predecessor, of course, quite an act to follow. Particularly, I wished I'd inherited his IT skills. However, we have got things that he set up still in process, and one of the most notable was the Care College with Redcar College, and although it's kind of limped on over COVID times and maybe experiencing difficulties, getting good people into care and making it somewhere attractive for people to work in the care sector is paramount in the work I'm doing at the moment, and it had that basis with what Dave set up, and he has been, I've tried to follow quite a hard act. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Watts. Can councillors please stand when they're addressing the Borough Council? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I knew Dave years before I came on the council. A friend and I used to go every week dancing to the bands at the Tap and Spile in Gisborough, and it was one of his rounds for the pubs. And we got chatting, and when I came on the council, I mean, politically we were poles apart, but he was such a good friend and supporter, and we had a few nights out having drinks in Gisborough, but I really do miss him, and I took him to the hospital, or went with him the last time when he collapsed here, and shouted at the staff that they weren't going to release him again because they kept doing that. And after that, I delivered his paper for him every day, wherever he was. But what struck me, I mean, his intelligence, but he has a mind of information about artifacts in this area that everybody else seems to have forgotten, and he knows where they are, and he was trying to get them out. There's a great big hole now that was Dave Walsh. Unfortunately, I couldn't go to the funeral, but he is sadly missed.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Pallister.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Dave was the first leader that I served under, and I think, you know, we've all sort of remembered him as being an intelligent man, but I can always remember him as a very kind man who, when I first went on the council, he really helped me through some quite difficult times in my personal life, and I'll never ever forgot that. And he was an excellent leader. He would always discuss with the Labour group what policies we discussed would have, what impact that would have on the vulnerable. Every time we looked at a policy, we would say, how will this affect the most vulnerable in our borough? And I suppose, be it getting through his life, he was always looking to make people's lives better. So if it wasn't helping them with benefits, it was what he actually done in adult social care, what he delivered on the county council, and the Labour Party was his family. So he worked hard in and out of the council, be it in the MP's office, in the council, or out on the streets canvassing. And my dad used to do the boards, and our mum would do all the sandwiches, and Dave was always first there to get his pack with his numbers on and what doors he'd knock, and he was always the last as well. Really hard working out on the streets, but he would always come back and make sure he got some of that food. And so I think, you know, a few members sat here today will remember the time in council, and there will probably only is a few that will remember the time, and he must have been asked at previous council meeting what achievements has Labour achieved over the last 3 years or so. And I remember him sat there, and he must have put these little squares out, and if anyone can remember this, and tied them together, and each time he gave an answer of, well, we've achieved this. And these little squares were getting longer and longer, and I just thought it was brilliant. That's something else I won't forget. And so just to end, he was a great man. He'll be sadly missed, and I'm sure the Labour Party and all the political parties will miss him, and the people of Redcar and Cleveland, who he's provided so much help and support, will miss him as well.
Thank you, Councillor Pallister. Councillor Hannaway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. feel he had a great sense of duty. I don't think he would have called it that, but I feel that he really did, and he was determined not to let his disabilities get in the way of his performing those duties. And I remember in cabinet briefings, I remember Amanda Skelton's face when Dave's chair used to come in and scrape along the paintwork on his way into the room. And he was also determined not to let his disabilities get in the way of having a drink with his friends as well. And he was very fond of pubs of Saltburn, so sometimes after meetings I'd give him a lift to Saltburn and then I had to wrestle him into a pub seat, usually in the Vic. And sometimes if I had to, because obviously you know, like Dave could talk for England, and sometimes if I had to go home early, he'd say, it's fine, I'll just wait for my taxi, just buy me 2 pints of Magnet. And that's, I think, how I'll remember him is with those 2 pints of Magnet and his council documents and his coastal view, sitting there looking perfectly content in the Vic in Saltburn. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hanaway. Councillor Sue Jeffrey.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's very difficult to know what to say about Dave, isn't it? But anybody who went to his funeral will know that he's managed to make an impact. There's absolutely no doubt about it at all. How many people in this room have had an obituary in the Times of the Guardian? You know, come on, this is pretty good going, isn't it? Not to mention a history, which we heard there, which was pieced together in a really interesting way from lots of different people, because I don't think anybody had heard his full history in that way quite before. And if you haven't seen it, we can get the details and we'll circulate it so that people can read it, because he had a very, very interesting history. But I was interested in what Mary said, that he always used to say to her, have you thought about this? Well, what he used to say to me was, have you done this? that was inevitable without whatever. And without Dave's help and support, you know, during my time as leader, I wouldn't have been able to do what I did, and he was really great. He did have his downsides, however. You've mentioned the paintwork at the council, which still bears his scars. He also never used one word when 30 would do, and you know, we've all had to listen to some of Dave's speeches, which had huge amounts of really good information in them, but you had to wait a long time till you found out what it was sometimes. And the other thing I always remember about Dave is when he asked for his cup of tea in a meeting, so he used to get him a cup of tea. I think it was 2 or 3 sugars and at least 2 packets of biscuits, because that was what would keep him sustained through the meeting. But Dave was a great bloke, an irreplaceable bloke, and the point that Anne's just made about the history that's died, the knowledge of history that's died with him is so real, because, you know, there is that huge gap now. I mean, he did, you know, write a lot of it down in the various columns that he did and things, and it would be good to see that some of that stuff is properly archived. But he knew so much about so many things in this area, and you know, that is what is going to be the loss. And also his advice and help and support, and his compassion, because he was a very compassionate person. And you know, he used to get frustrated about his own disability, but he would never be frustrated when somebody came to him with an issue or a disability or something to solve, and he would work through it and make and find a way through and be able to help that person. And I think he had 100% record in that regard. So I think we'll all miss Dave, you know, the good bits and some of the slightly bad bits, but he was a good bloke, and you know, we're a much sadder place without him, I think.
Thanks, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I remember Dave from, go back over 20 odd years, when I had first joined Loftus Town Council, and he was on Loftus Town Council then. And I was always amazed at his knowledge then. But one of the main things that I wanted to speak for was because he played a big part with Councillor McCluskey in getting us flood defences. He took us down to see the Minister, the lobby for flood defences in Skinny Grove, and they played a big part in doing that. And right throughout the years, whenever approached, I've never known him not help or give you the best advice he possibly could. So it was a pleasure to go to his funeral, and it was a pleasure to know him as a person, a friend, and a politician. So rest in peace, big man. So that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Glyn Nightingale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I was very surprised during, I think it was August, wasn't it, when I opened the register of the Times, and I saw this obituary, and it said David Walsh, and I thought it was the football reporter at first. And then I read through, and then I realised that I'd actually been reading his pieces about the what was in the Times 100 years ago, and I'd regularly read these, and I hadn't realised it was the David Walsh. And I think I want to echo a lot of the points that have been made by many people here. I think he was well on the way to moving towards being a Renaissance man, and I think the fact that he was in the Times and he got an obituary in the Times proved that he was very close to achieving that objective. And I think we shall all miss his contributions that we've had to this council. And let's hope that he does actually rest in peace.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's very humbling, is it not, just to sit and listen to those thoughts and reminiscences of fellow members. I've known David for many, many years, mainly through encountering him in Saltburn, and we've had many discussions during that period, quietly, informed discussions, I would say, and that's helpful. So there was not a lot of postulating. I welcomed that. He had no political horizons that were impediments, so he was able to engage at every level. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend his funeral, like several others, but he was certainly in our thoughts and prayers on that day. So I'd just like to remember David for the friendship that he showed to me, quiet friendship, my admiration for his erudite discussions, and reminiscing about his performance in terms of scrutiny. Those of us who served on scrutiny committees where he was present would recognise his concern, his social conscience, and those memories will be held for a long time. So I'm sure I echo everything that's been said, and sad that David's parted. So despite his disabilities, which became more prevalent in his final years, he was certainly active mentally until the very end. So good memories of him.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Dave was a great asset to the Labour Party, to the council and to the community. And I think I've just been wondering, Sue, I think you and I are probably the only people here who were on Langbar Council. And of course we had twin-tier administration at the time. And Dave was on, along with Ian and people like Pat Harford, Paul Harford, they were on the county council. And I really felt that Dave loved that county council, and he always wanted to go back to a united Teesside. I was of the opposite persuasion, but I think we could respect each other's point of view. And I must admit, when I dealt with Cleveland County, I often got a far better response from the officers of Cleveland County than I did from the Langbar officers. Perhaps it was because they had nothing much to do on Cleveland County. But when the change happened and we became a unitary authority, it was said to me, I'm not quite sure who it was who said it now, but they said, you're lucky in Redcar and Cleveland, or Langbar they might have said, because you're getting the cream of the crop. And people like, and they said people like David Walsh, Paul Harford, Pat Harford, I don't think Paul actually came across, but at that time it was thought he was going to do, and Ian Jeffrey, the people who were the cream at Cleveland County were all coming to serve Redcar and Cleveland. So, you know, that may be why we got off to a good start at the time. I remember after an election, I remember sitting in the station at Boosbeck, not the railway station, the pub, and Dave came in, and you know, we're all relaxing a bit. I thought I'd got in, but Dave was very dubious about his chances. But of course, the next day he was successful, which he thoroughly deserved. Because he had a wandering profile. I think correct me if I'm wrong, but he certainly represented Hemlington at one stage. That would be when he was on the county. I think he represented Loftus, certainly, and also Skelton. He put himself about a bit, probably looking for a safe seat, but on the other hand, he was successful when he got into these positions, and it gave him a broader knowledge of, you know, local government in the area, and his talents were spread far and wide. But more recently, as this has been alluded to earlier, he used to sit at the back, probably where Councillor Clark is, and he'd be asked a question, and, you know, he didn't, I like notes and things in front of me, you know, to fall back on. He just gave the answer, and the answer was interminable quite often. You just couldn't the mayor couldn't stop him. Even you wouldn't have been able to, Mr. Mayor. And because he had such a wide knowledge of everything. He'll be missed, as you probably have noticed. I'm a contributor to Coastal View, and of course Dave was probably the main contributor, and with probably 2 pages written by himself, and then he didn't take. I always like to take the credit, but wisely. He just signed himself Holly Bush. Well, most of the people thought Holly Bush was a pub, which was probably appropriate. But so, you know, in a way, the Coastal View will be at a loss without Dave, as will the rest of us.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. And our final councillor is Councillor Eyre.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I can only concur there with what other speakers there have said about Dave Walsh, and they can they have put it over more eloquently there than what I can. Yes, I remember Dave, like we've all said, his knowledge, his research, and his ability there to help everybody within the chamber. And it didn't matter there which political party or group there that you were associated with. But my particular scene about Dave, and we would get to, in committee meetings, full council, and Dave would be sat there. He would say something in his presentation, like you just said, Steve. He'd go on and on and on, but he'd done his research, as you know, right down to the full stop. And I always remember there, on some occasions, the more newer councillors would start having a go at Dave, setting an argument up with him, and I would look round the committee room or the chamber, and I could see the more long-standing the councillors from way back, and they'd be good. They'd have and they'd just be shaking their head as much to say, don't take Dave on. Don't take him on. He's researched this and researched it, and please don't take him on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Thank you, councillors, for those who have spoken in memory of Councillor Walsh. I think it just shows how highly he was thought of within this council and within the borough, within how many councillors have spoken in memory of him. I've never known, as a councillor myself, so many councillors speaking in memory of him, so thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to the agenda, and the first one is apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillors Gallagher, Gray, Hollyoak, Massey and Councillor Carl Quatermain. Do we have any other apologies?
Then Williams, please, and Carrie Cook's running late.
What was the first one, Councillor Brown, please?
Geraldine Williams.
Okay, thank you. Councillor King?
Councillor Deborah Downson and Councillor Graham Jeffrey, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Andrea Turner.
Councillor Lee Holmes.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Item 2 is to receive declarations of interest. If you have any declarations of interest for members, please complete the green form that is being circulated around the chamber. Item 4 is to confirm the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of July 2022. Can someone move them, please?
Move those, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Smith. Item 4 is to note the attendance matrix. Noted. Item 5 is to receive any announcements from the Mayor, the Leader of the Council or Cabinet members. I have an announcement. I was delighted yesterday. It was the stage 4 of the Tour of Britain cycle race, which took place in the area, and I would like to thank everybody involved in the organisation of the event. The borough looked absolutely spectacular on telly and reflected well, I think, on our teams that made it that possible. So could that be noted, please? Our thanks to all the street scene teams and all those who were involved in the organisation of that event. I'm holding a charity race night at Saltburn Golf Club on Saturday the 15th of October. Tickets are only £5, which includes a pie and peas. All are welcome to attend. Do we have any announcements from the leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure that most members in the chamber are aware of the news that was broken from Buckingham Palace this morning. I understand that the Queen is unwell and that her family have gone up to Scotland to be with her, and I'm quite sure that everybody in this chamber wishes her well and hopefully for a recovery. I'm just going to go through the leader's report quickly, having told you that news there. So the Mayor has already told you about the Tour of Britain that happened yesterday. Of course, we're all aware that the track record for hosting successful events has been over a number of years within Redcar and Cleveland, and hopefully we'll see some further events coming to the fore. It was quite spectacular. Our officers were absolutely amazing, and our teams who were out there making sure that the borough looked at its best. The Regent, I'm quite sure that we're all aware that it's been confirmed and it's got an operator then. I don't intend to go into a great deal of detail about this because there is a question from a member regarding the Regents further on there, but I'm quite sure that we all wish them a success going forward. The work has started at Duncan Place in Loftus for its library, and I'm pleased to say that Green Flag, two of our fabulous green spaces, have once again been recognised as among the best in the country. And these actually, what we've got, it's Flats Lane, the Woodland Country Park, and Gisborough Branch Walkway. And I want to thank our officers and our workforce for the work that they've actually done there. Levelling up, and I'm quite sure that we're all watching to see what's going to happen today down in Westminster. We are hoping as a council that we will benefit from the 2 bids that have actually been put in there. I know we've got some issues with that, and there's also questions from members that I will answer more fully. And of course, Gisborough Town Hall and the Lord Lieutenant of North Yorkshire came to open that. And I want to thank all the members and the local communities for adding to that. That's all I intend to say at the moment, Mr. Mayor, about this. I do have some questions, and a lot of these items will be given a more elaborate answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Langer. Do any Cabinet members have any announcements? Okay, thank you. Item 7, we have no questions from the public. My apologies, John. I presume you don't have any questions?
Yeah, correct, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry. Moving on to item 8 is to consider and agree any reports from the Cabinet and the Council's committees, and the report is the senior structure and revised scrutiny arrangements. Councillor Nightingale, are you presenting this report? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is a fairly straightforward report, and I hope we can get complete consensus on this. This is essentially a report of how the independent Liberal Democratic administration is continuing the process of streamlining the Council's organisation. The revised senior management structure has been agreed by the Cabinet, and it aims to ensure that the Council's organisational capacity has the dynamism to deliver its key corporate plan priorities, as well as ensuring affordability and prioritising the delivery of services to the public. The changes are designed to meet the challenges that the Council faces in the future, namely emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic, the uncertainty about the government's grant settlement, facing what you might call the new normal, the cost of living crisis, the rocketing energy prices, and finally responding to the new Trust government's changing priorities. In particular, the major changes include improving the managerial span of control, the appointment of a Director of Finance, and the immediate recruitment for the existing vacant post of an Executive Director for Growth, Enterprise and Environment, with the remit to include a focus on the Council's key future drivers of protecting the environment and major investments in the borough's future prosperity. The interviews for that job will take place next week. The scrutiny changes reflect what is essential in local government in a modern liberal democracy, to have an effective scrutiny process. The proposed scrutiny and improvement committee changes seek to realign the arrangements so that they reflect the new corporate directorates and the cabinet portfolios, and also to reflect the growing importance given to tackling climate change and protecting the environment. There will also be included a climate forum as well. It includes the developments associated with TVCA, Teesworks and the Freeport, and these need proper scrutiny arrangements. The scrutiny changes have been through the appropriate constitutional requirements, and the revised Scrutiny and Improvement Committee arrangements would come into effect from the September cycle. They are namely committees for adults' wellbeing and health, children and families, corporate resources and governance, climate and environment, and growth. The committee remits are set out in the report and the appendix. The monitoring officer needs to be authorised to amend the Council's constitution in line with these changes in the scrutiny arrangements, and I commend this report to the Council for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. Councillor Sue Jeffrey. Oh, sorry, Councillor Jeffrey. Could I have a seconder?
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lanigan, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments, really, more than anything else, because The majority of the structure was agreed by Cabinet, and it's only the Section 151 finance officer whose salary is over 100,000, I think, that we're formally approving today. But I just would want to draw attention of the council to the fact that very far from streamlining, we now have virtually the same structure as we did when you took over in 2019. Sadly, there are no comparative costs included or were included in the report, so we can't see whether or not this structure is costing or how much savings have been made, because those figures haven't been made available to us. The structure that we now have in post, with the exception, I think, of one post, has not been out to external advert at all. So all those very senior posts have been appointed from internal positions. And I'm sorry, but the fact that you've held the Regeneration Executive Director post empty for the last 3 years is probably one of the reasons why we lost the first round of levelling up bids in the first place, because we didn't have resources to put into that process properly. And I'm glad you've finally come to your senses, but it's taken long enough. And I remain very concerned that we have a structure in place where we haven't recruited externally for the most senior posts of this authority. I also remain concerned, and will highlight this now, that in the original report to Cabinet, it talked about moving to salary scales for our senior team as opposed to fixed point salaries, and that of course brings with it significant inflationary costs, and I wait to see what the report that will highlight those says about just exactly what the cost of this new structure is. You know, I'd be very interested if the Cabinet member could actually tell us what the difference between the costs then and the costs now are, and what, when we move to salary scales, the costs will be. I do just want to comment as well on the scrutiny committees. I'm very pleased that we now have the new scrutiny committee on climate change, and I wish that the very best of luck. I hope it does really good work and holds to account this council in terms of delivery on its really important climate change target. In relation to the regeneration committee, I'm very pleased that that includes reference to Tees Works, Freeport and TVCA, and the leader will know that I have already raised with her a key issue that needs to be discussed by that committee, which was summarised in a 3-page article in Private Eye this week, and you may well dismiss Private Eye as a satirical magazine, but it is also done very serious journalism, not least of which was the issues around the post office counters debacle. And the fact is that that pulled together a whole range of issues around the governance, the financing, and the letting of contracts at Tees Works that has implications for this council, how much money we get in terms of business rates, how we ensure that we are able to give local people the skills to be able to do the jobs that they need to do, and how we can actually ensure that local businesses and people actually are able to access those jobs. So I'm very pleased that Councillor Lanigan has said that there will be a special meeting of that scrutiny committee very soon to enable us to look at that whole situation. Because if you remember, the peer review said very clearly that we needed to have a much better handle on how we aligned our activity with the work of Tees Works and the Freeport to ensure this authority benefited in the best possible way from that investment there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's worth noting on 4.9 that there is an error in the spelling, just for sake of clarity, so that the Improvement Committee will be about adults' well-being and not moorland, but adults' well-being and health. So I assume that this will be corrected in due course. I am interested, Mr. Mayor, in whether we have been advised that the Constitution will be changed as a result of this motion being passed. So are we clear that this is a technical piece of legislation, and will the change to the Constitution be enacted in time for the new committees to be convened. And in respect of the remit of the climate subcommittee, the climate, environment, including neighbourhoods and culture. So if we look at the list of work that this particular scrutiny committee is being asked to undertake, it is an enormous piece of work. So I'm really pleased that we are able, through the lobbying that has been undertaken over the past year, to confirm in the report that there will be a climate change forum and that this will meet quarterly. And it will be an opportunity for every member who so chooses in this chamber to engage in an informed discussion about the challenges of climate change. So I look forward very much to those meetings of the forum and Councillor Westbury leading on that to take us through the challenges that we're undoubtedly going to face in the lead up to 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a very sensible division of the roles of council and its functions. My only concern when you look at this list as to what is in each scrutiny committee is the extra time it's going to take for scrutiny meetings. As it is, we very often go over, but when you look at all the items under each heading, it's going to take a considerable length of time to give each subject justice. I am pleased, however, that finance has now gone back to being under one committee. I didn't like the way it was previously split between resources and growth. I felt it was hard to look at the full financial position when it's split between two committees. So I am glad that that's now under one heading. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. If we have no other councillor wishing to speak, I'll hand over to Mr Newton first in relation to the query from Councillor Thompson in the Constitution issue. Then I'll hand back to Councillor Nightingale, who can sum up.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The changes to the scrutiny structure will be a constitutional change, so we've been through the relevant consultation with governance committee, scrutiny, etc. If council approves that structure today, then that takes immediate effect, essentially. There might be a couple of working days lag while I edit the constitution document itself, but the arrangements will be in place in time for this cycle of meetings.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Nightingale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I just reply to Councillor Jeffrey? The cost actually is £137,000. And on the point about the same structure, clearly, if we're going back to what you said we had, that cost has been saved over some time recently. But there are other consequential issues involved in this. It isn't the same structure. We have a managing director in place, and the idea is to have much more collaboration rather than hierarchical arrangements. And in addition to that, I deliberately mentioned the span of control of managers because the span of control is has been in some cases that we inherited, where one person was managing one person, and that really isn't appropriate. On the salary scale, I'll make sure that the information is circulated. Councillor Jeffrey has actually had a briefing on this from the officers, and I think it's quite important to recognise that her idea, for example, of an advert would produce legal complications and issues. It would incur extra unnecessary costs to the council. It would in fact be a major disruption to the organisation of the council at the very time when we're trying to deal with the major financial pressures that the council is going to face. As I said earlier on, we don't know what the financial settlement will be, and judging by the initial remarks by the new Prime Minister, it doesn't look as if the public sector, and the local government in particular, is going to do particularly well. So in a time of economic, political and financial uncertainty, it doesn't seem to me to be the case that we should be exposing the council to any unnecessary risk. This is the time when we've got to come and make sensible, common sense, rational decisions and make sure the council responds effectively to the future challenges that we face. On the point that Councillor Watts and effectively Councillor Thompson made about the workload of the committee, in particular the issue of climate change, is effectively covered by the forum. And of course, the proof of the pudding will actually be in the ET. And if we are going to ensure that in the major uncertain times that we face now, we've got to have the organisation of the council, we've got to have the scrutiny arrangements of the council, so that we are able to do the job that the people sent us here to do more effectively. And I commend this report to the council for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. Councillor Jeffrey, it's not a debate between back and forth, so you can't come back.
It's a point of personal explanation because you specifically named me, Councillor Nightingale. It was just in relation to the point you made about the flat structure, and I specifically asked Steve Newton about the report that was presented in 17th of September 2019, where it said that the role, in the managing director role, will in practical terms need to be created by adding the head of paid service remit to one of the current corporate director positions. If you read the job description, you will see that hasn't happened, and you now have a chief executive in all but name. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Okay, I'll move it on. That's fine. Is everyone happy with a show of hands in relation to this agenda item? And we are looking at two items, the senior structure and the revised scrutiny arrangements. So I'll take one vote for those two items. Is everyone happy with that? All those in favour then, please. Show her. And those against? Okay, that is carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 9, to receive the reports from portfolio holders. And this afternoon, it is the report of the Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport, Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report provides the Borough Council with an update on progress, developments and key issues from the Highways and Transport portfolio over the past year and sets out plans for future service developments and improvements. The portfolio provides a number of frontline services which are not only a statutory requirement but also services that affect the day-to-day lives of every resident in the borough. These services include highways and engineering, strategic transport, fleet services, parking, community safety, CCTV, enforcement, street lighting and operation of the Saltburn Cliff Tramway. Last 12 months have been extremely difficult for everyone, and therefore the focus of the portfolio has been to keep as many key services as possible operating as normal, despite increasing demands and fluctuating resource levels due to the impact of COVID. Highways and engineering. Each year the highways and engineering team tend to take a resurfacing programme to keep the borough's roads in safe condition and to ensure that they retain their structural integrity. As funds available to the council are limited by the amount of grant funding that's received, there's an ongoing assessment of the condition of roads, which is then used to draw up a list of roads to be resurfaced in priority order. In 2021-22, 68 roads were resurfaced, several footpaths and 2 car parks. The team is working closely with contractors to reduce the carbon impact of these activities through the use of different materials and changes to working practices. Team are also responsible for the inspection and maintenance of all their highway assets to ensure that they are in safe condition, including roadside gullies, culverts, crash barriers, road lining, signs and lighting. This is an ongoing process of both scheduled inspections and responding to damage caused by road traffic accidents, flooding, vandalism. This is an extremely important function as the safety of the highway users is of paramount importance, and there are significant legal and financial implications should any aspect of the highway be found to be the cause of any accident or injury. Last winter, the team gritted approximately 29,400 kilometres of roads and were needed over 245 times day and night due to icy conditions and snow. In heavy rainfall, there are areas of the network where the volume of water is greater than it can cope with, requiring additional resource to be deployed to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. Clearing of roadside gullies in 2021-22 were carried out 98% of the time as scheduled, with approximately 30 additional visits due to flooding of blockages. The Council is responsible for maintaining circa 450 highway structures, including bridges, culverts, retaining walls. The first round of principal inspections is due to be completed by the end of the summer, followed by a procurement exercise and works programme to repair identified defects in the region of £1 million. Improvements to the road junction at Swans Corner are progressing well and are due to be completed by the end of September. As soon as Swans Corner's project has been completed, the team will move on to the junction improvements at Normandy High Street. Strategic transport, the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. The Tees Valley Combined Authority has received the sum of £310 million for transport investment across the Tees Valley until 2027. They have announced some of their proposals for expenditure in the borough, which are listed in the report. Concessionary fare scheme. Colleagues at TVCA have secured agreement with the bus operators in relation to the cost of the 2022-23 scheme, which allows eligible residents to travel by bus for free or a flat rate before 9:30 AM weekdays. This year's offer will be expanded later this year to allow companions to disabled people to also travel for free. While the current patronage figures mean that we have a budget saving this year, I must caution that the cost of future settlements may be considerably higher as inflation in bus industry costs feeds through into bus fares. The latest figures provided by the bus operators show that the bus use is recovering from the levels seen during the pandemic, but they are about a fifth less than previously. East Cleveland bus service. Officers have been working with the TVAC to secure a trial scheduled bus service in East Cleveland to supplement the Tees Flex demand responsive transport. This will connect our smaller communities to Saltburn Railway Station, the East Cleveland Primary Care Hospital and major shopping areas. A timetable has now been agreed with councillors and TVC are processing the application, which will allow a tender process to be initiated. Hopefully the service will be running by mid-November. East Cleveland Train. An independent review of the analytical work carried out to date was undertaken during August. This review is by a specialist consultant, also reported on the attitude of the railway organisations involved in any future business case towards the proposal. The report states that the project is built between a low and medium value for money, but has many socio-economic benefits for East Cleveland. While a strategic outcome business case will be needed as part of moving the project forward, it could be more cost effective to initially focus on raising the awareness and profile of the project with key political stakeholders at a sub-regional and regional level and within the rail industry. Getting their support and buy-in will be crucial to its future chances of success. Enforcement. The enforcement team continue to monitor areas across the borough for littering, fly tipping, parking and public space protection order contraventions. The team continues to respond to hotspot areas for all offences as well as establish patrols and work with street scene and community safety on specific projects. Parking. Council is responsible for management and enforcement of both on and off street parking throughout the borough, including a number of resident parking zones. Parking strategy and associated delivery plan was adopted in March 2020, which included a number of work streams and projects to improve the performance of the service, resolve several historic parking issues, and give a more consistent approach to parking provision and charging. Community safety. Community Safety Partnership. Redcar and Cleveland Community Safety Partnership are in the second year of the 3-year Community Safety Plan. The partnership continues to be well attended by all partner agencies. Prevent. Representatives of various council services alongside other agencies continue to work together on the Prevent agenda. Preventing individuals becoming drawn into terrorism-related activities or being radicalised is long established. Whilst Cleveland's not a funded area, we have recently benefited from the provision of a Home Office Prevent Coordinator for the region. Public space protection orders. We currently have a number of public space protection orders. One is the Dog Control Powers, PSPO, and this has been reviewed and extended for a further 3 years. New elements have been added, including dogs on lead by direction and specific areas where dogs are now required to be on leads, including formal gardens, e.g. the Italian gardens at Saltburn. We're also considering varying the existing alcohol PSPO to include aggressive begging, following an increase in incidents over the last 18 months. Antisocial behaviour. The 3 antisocial behaviour officers continue to work closely with Cleveland Police and have secured a number of house closures as a result of ASB perpetrated by tenants. Antisocial behaviour injunctions, as well as community protection warnings and notices. Saltburn Cliff Tramway. After 2 years of being closed due to COVID, the Cliff Tramway opened on Platinum Jubilee. Difficulties with recruiting resulted in not being able to open full-time until mid-July. However, patronage has been excellent, and the attraction will be open 7 days a week until the end of October, when it will revert to Friday to Monday opening until the end of the year. Fleet services. Team are responsible for provision and maintenance of a wide range of vehicles and equipment to support the delivery of frontline services. Team are continually reviewing the impact of changing technology on new and existing fleet and have been involved in the trial of an electric refuse collection vehicle. Although only with the council for a limited time, it did prove a worthwhile trial that could be adopted in future should the technology become more affordable. More immediate advancement and more sustainable vehicle operation is the use of hydro-treated vegetable oil in diesel vehicles. It is currently being trialled in smaller street sweepers, but has the potential to be used across the diesel fleet, giving a significant reduction in vehicle emissions. There are, however, a number of service pressures, many of which are outside the council's control, including staff recruitment and retention, vehicle replacement costs, new vehicle delivery timescales, increasing vehicle hire costs, and fuel costs. Members are asked to note the contents of the report and commend the work of all the teams in highways and transport portfolio. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. We'll now open it for a question and answer session. Can I remind councillors that set aside is only 10 minutes, so please, your questions should be succinct and relate directly to matters within the report. Councillor Clark.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I want to talk about the A171 in Gisborough, which is in my ward, which goes from North Lodge to the Woodhouse Triangle, or basically known as the Gisborough Bypass. Through the previous portfolio holder, we held a lot of meetings with all ward councillors and the local MP to improve the safety of this road.
Councillor Clark, I'm going to be very strict here. I want a question, and then Councillor Foggo can answer. Please ask your question, and quite quickly, please.
No, I don't think you understand, Mr Mayor. Look, he needs to understand what the background is, because it's just new to the portfolio.
The question in relation to the report, please.
Forget it, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ovens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of observations, really, and questions. I'm particularly interested in 3.6 with bus patronage in the borough. And
I'm going to interrupt you. Questions, please, not observations. Questions in relation to the report.
Okay. Will we be getting better timetabling and better services into our bus stops by cooperating with Arriva more closely? Thank you. And dog fouling, I don't know whether it's from lack of officers, but there seems to be very few penalty notices issued, 13, because it's one of the complaints I get quite frequently. And finally, there are areas identified at 6.2, but all parts of the borough are experiencing off-road bikes, and I appreciate this is a joint operation between the police and antisocial behaviour teams and that, but what are we doing to address that issue, which is a common cause of complaint? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ovens. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Ovens, the timetables, basically Arriva provide the timetables to the council. We print them, and then one of the officers, as an addition to his normal role, goes out and puts the timetables out around the borough. You can imagine that there are hundreds of bus timetables, and therefore it is a time-consuming job. So it is one that is done once whenever the timetables change, and then if a timetable at a bus stop is reported as being missing or damaged, then we'll go out and replace it. But we don't have the manpower to go out and check bus timetables every week or month. Dog fouling penalty notices, it is one of the worst issues that we have in the council, and it's one of the hardest ones to actually give a penalty notice. To be able to give a penalty notice, you actually have to see the dog do the business with the person's owner standing with it, and you have to be able to get information off the owner to be able to give the penalty notice. So it is actually a very difficult penalty notice to give out, because as soon as the public see one of our officers, they pick up the poo. Off-road bikes, our ASP team do work with the police to try and sort out the off-road bike problem. But it is mainly a police issue in that the ASP officers are not trained to deal with off-road bike people. If they can identify them, they will take action against them. But a lot of them, as you know, go around with hoodies and helmets to hide their identity. As we've seen in the Gazette today, there's a list of about 15 pictures of people that they're trying to identify at the moment. So the police have started using a DNA spray that they can spray on the bikes and the perpetrators, which then, if they catch them, then they have the proof that they were using the off-road bikes. So work is being done on it, but again, it is another one that is very hard to actually catch the perpetrators.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Councillor Corley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Foggo, for the report. I'd just like to ask the Cabinet member, especially around the community safety. As we all know, Redcar and Cleveland were the second worst in the country for violent crime. So I'd like to ask the Cabinet member, what as a council are we going to do working with the police to get that down? It's important and imperative, especially when we've just had the knife angel here in Redcar and Cleveland, and then there's no mention of it at all in this report. The other one regarding the parking penalties, how many of them are coastal and how many are outside? I know it says it's from September last year, so it was during school hours. And is the car that goes past our school still working? Because I haven't seen it for quite a long time, and it would be beneficial to be back and doing the job that it's meant to be doing. Around the fact we have the 3 ASB officers, for me, antisocial behaviour is becoming a huge issue.
Is this a question?
It is. How are we going to tackle it? Because for me, the 3 officers we have already are overstretched. I think we need to look at maybe having them so that there's some that are on the floor and look at some that are doing admin. They can't be doing both at the same time. So we need answers to do both. 3's just not enough for the borough.
Thank you. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson, isn't it? Collie. Oh. Community safety. The community safety is looked at through the community safety groups, and in the community safety groups are all the different agencies that are involved: police, fire, ambulance, social services, and they work together with reports that have come in, and from there any issues are then put forward for further action. The penalty notices, I don't have that information, I'll have to get back to you. And the 3 ASB officers, they are working hard, they are trying to achieve all they can, but as with everything at the moment, the council is under immense financial pressure, and therefore trying to increase manpower is very hard at present, but we keep a close eye on our establishment, and if there's a possibility to increase it, we do try to do it. I missed what the third question was that you came out with.
The actual car that we have that drives around finding those that are parked outside our schools. But can I also say through you, Mr. Mayor, my first question on the community safety was how are we as a council going to tackle the fact that we are the second worst in the country for violent crime?
Well, we work through the community safety groups, and that goes through to the police. The violent crime side of it is down to the police.
Councillor Foggo, just I did say at the beginning of the meeting, mobile phones switched off or on silent. If you don't know how to do it, please ask your neighbour and they will do it for you. Sorry, Councillor Foggo, go ahead.
The camera car is used. It was off the road for a few months because there was problems with the computer systems on it. It is now back on the road, but there are so many restrictions on what it can be used for, and the main thing being is that it's mainly used for outside schools, and one of the issues that we're approaching the government is to be able to use it for littering out of cars as it's driving between the schools. But that will be down to government changes, not something that we can implement.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Before I bring in the next speaker, I have listed Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hannaway, Councillor Pallister, Councillor Brown, Councillor Clark, I'll allow you to come back in again, and Councillor Brady. I'll be taking no more questions after Councillor Brady, because we're over our allocated time now. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Foggo, for your report. Very wide-ranging and clearly a lot of responsibilities. I've got two questions, Mayor. One relates to 3.2. The discussions have been ongoing in Saltburn about new cycleway for at least 2 years. We started...
Councillor Thompson, question please.
Yeah, and
I'm going to have to be fair to all members.
Right, so my question is, what can you do to speed up the discussions on the new cycleway that is proposed through Saltburn, which at the moment is designed not to be available until 2024, which is delaying the implementation of the redesign of the junction at Milton Street, which has been on the table for 2018. So that's my question in respect of 3.2. In respect of 7.1, Mr. Mayor, it is regrettable that the delays in opening the Cliff Tramway have taken place, and ward members would like very much to be advised of what has been the capital spend over the last 4 years, and what business plan do we have in place to make sure that there is no repetition of the alleged problems in staffing that have made the delay to opening and the difficulty of maintaining the year-round service that we were promised previously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, Mr. Mayor. The cycleway is being worked through, I think it's Sustrans and the regeneration team, and highways will only be involved in the implementation. We don't have any input into the actual management of it. It's only the implementation. The tramway, I'll have to get back to you on the capital spend and business case. Staffing issues were down to the fact that the team that were in place left, and they had to be retrained, and a couple of the people that were employed to start didn't start. We ended up having to re-recruit, and therefore that was why it was delayed.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Councillor Hannaway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a matter of community safety on the highway, could we please have more notice when there are sudden changes that affect particular residents? Obviously, the bike event was a great event and we're glad to have had it, but the residents that were most affected by taking away the traffic islands had no notice at all. We councillors had 2 days' notice, which meant that they lost their means of crossing the road. And it would be better if, you know, because obviously they only discovered that when they...
Councillor Hannaway, question, please.
So would it be possible not to inconvenience residents so that they lose their means of crossing the road, or at least give them some notice so they know it's going to happen?
Thank you. Councillor Foggo.
Councillor Aranway, with events like the Tour of UK or Britain, then it is a massive event for the borough to have, and therefore for the short period of time that the roads are closed or traffic lights aren't working, then I think it's something that we can possibly put up with. What I will look at is, and I've already talked about this with some of the officers, is that we need to put communications out a lot earlier to tell people when the road closures are going to happen, and how it's going to affect certain areas. and that will be looked at for any future events.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Councillor Pallister.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I just quickly thank Teresa Cave for bringing the Life Angel to Redcar and all the work that she does to prevent more families losing their child to knife attacks. My question is 6.2, and it's the group youth violence separate task and finish group. Only last week we had youths running about with machetes and a gun, and we know that this is down to drug dealing, it's turf wars. I'm just asking really if the separate task and finish group will obviously be looking at drugs, which is the major issue causing most of the crime, and also will that report be coming to this council either through the appropriate scrutiny committee or council?
Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Powell, what paragraph was that? What paragraph? As far as the separate task and finish groups are working on it, this is a part of the community safety groups, and these are closed sessions which has all the various services involved with it, and the task and finish group will provide their reports. I will have to look and see whether they get published or not. I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think I promised to ask a question. I just want to revisit the dog fouling figures, please, Cabinet Member. I know it's like Groundhog Day for lots of us councillors every day when we're getting dog fouling. You mentioned I do have a lot of sympathy for how difficult it is to get these sort of fines and to prove the point. But the last administration, I believe, when I was enrolled, that we brought up the means to pick up your dog, having the means to pick up after your dog policy through legislation. Now, I'm just wondering how many, if you probably don't know this, you could get the information, but are the enforcement officers out there actually asking people who've got the means to pick up after their dog? And if so, could you find out how often we're patrolling hotspot areas also? I mean, as being somebody on a regular school pick up and drop off, I never see the patrol guys around when there's lots of dog there all down sort of Mersey Road. I never see them on the beach patrolling hotspot areas, which I know we said that we would do in the past. So I'm just wondering if we are actually using the means to pick up after your dog policy that's there for us to use.
Thank you.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Brown, the means to pick up, I'll have to get back to you on that one. What you have to accept is that we have a certain number of enforcement officers who do not only dog fouling, but they do parking, littering, and all the other different issues, the PSPO side of things. So as far as the patrolling is concerned, then they can't be everywhere at the same time, and with a few enforcement side of things, we have to try and move the timing that they're actually out on patrol. So with the numbers we have, they're actually spread pretty thinly. So the chances of seeing one are not that great. But I will try and get information on it.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Councillor Clark.
Right, redraft, Mr Mayor. Is the A171 between North Lodge and Woodhouse Triangle being resurfaced after just this year a large sum of money was spent on it to improve the road safety? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Did you get that?
Mr Mayor, no. I got there was a lot of money spent on it, but
Bill,
give me the question, please.
just will you ask it again, please?
Redraft, Mr. Mayor. Is the A171 between North Lodge and Woodhouse Triangle being resurfaced after just this year a large sum of money was spent on it this year to improve road safety through line marking?
I'll have to get back to you on that because I don't have the answer to that question.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. And our final question is from Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on paragraph 3.1 about the funding, £6.9 million fund to improve bus services between Middlesbrough and Redcar on the Eston corridor. Can you explain what changes passengers and residents can expect to see, and when would these be implemented? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Brady. This is the bus service along the Redcar and Middlesbrough. As far I don't know exactly what the changes are going to be, and nobody does at the moment because it's all TVCA driven, and they have not come out with a lot of the information. One of the ways they're looking to improve the bus services is to increase their speed through different areas, and because our roads are not wide enough to have bus lanes everywhere, one of the ways they are trying to achieve it is by prioritizing buses at traffic lights, and it is all down to an electronic system where as the bus approaches, it then gets priority to get through the traffic lights. But that is all the information that we have so far on what they're actually planning to do. Once they come out with their plans, then we'll be able to come back and give the councillors some more information on it. But trying to get information out of TBC is pretty hard at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. And that is the end of that agenda item, and we're moving on to agenda item number 10, to consider reports. We have two reports. The first one is the report of the Leader of the Council, decisions taken under urgency provisions. Councillor Lanigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report summarises decisions that have been taken recently under the urgency provision as set out in the Council Access to Information. The first one, members, that we've got, I'm quite sure you've got the papers in front of you. RCDVA Housing, KIC, formally informed the Council at short notice that it could no longer continue to provide the services at 58 Ormsby Road. The Housing Regulator issued a legal notice on that. We have consulted the Councillor Ryder, Chair of Children and Families Scrutiny Committee. The full contract value for 18 months was £407,000, I am presuming, Chair, 151. The second one that we've actually got on there under general exception is the Greenhouse Grant, Local Authority Delivery Phase scheme aimed to improve the energy efficiency. Councillor Sheila Hollyoak, Chair of Adult and Community Committee, was aware of that. The Council was awarded an additional £1,165,362. So that's it. Redcar and Cleveland, of course, applied for that allocation, which BEARS had calculated based on Redcar and Cleveland fuel poverty figures. So they're the two, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kay. Does anyone wish to speak on this report? If not, can I have general agreement in passing that report, please? That's carried. Thank you. The second one is the report of the Governance Inspector and Monitoring Officer, review of proportionality and distribution of seats. Does anyone who's proposing this? Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. Councillor Lanigan, are you seconding? Okay. Does anyone wish to speak on this report? Or can we take it as read? I'll take a general consensus that is passed then, please. Can we have agreement? Thank you. That is also passed. I'm now going to bring forward item number 12, which is the revised scrutiny and improvement committees, which you should have all in front of you. And also, obviously, we have the additional Climate and the Environment Scrutiny and Improvement Committee. If I can call them normal 4 scrutinies, are we in agreement with the chairs and vice chairs and membership? Thank you. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to propose Councillor Philip Thompson as chair of the Climate and Environment Scrutiny and Improvement.
Councillor Griffiths, I was going to, you've jumped the gun, I was going to actually bring that, is that for the Climate and Environment Scrutiny? Yes, I was going to announce that in a moment, so. Okay. Obviously the other new scrutiny is the Climate and the Environment Scrutiny and Improvement Committee. The membership is in front of you. Obviously we need to appoint a chair and vice chair, a new chair and vice chair of the Climate and Environmental Scrutiny and Improvement. So can I have nominations, please, in relation to the chair and vice chair of these of this scrutiny, please? I will now take them. Councillor Brown.
Adam Brooke for chair, and for vice chair, Councillor Kerry Corley, please.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second Adam. Obviously, I can't second myself.
Right. So for those 2 nominations, I'll take the seconder as Councillor Pallister, and you're proposing. Thank you. Any other nominations?
Can I repeat, Mr. Mayor, can I propose Councillor Philip Thompson for scrutiny and improvement?
Is that chair or as vice?
Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Do we have any nominations for vice chair? Any different? Councillor Hickson.
Can I nominate Councillor Julie Craig, please?
Sorry, who was that?
Councillor Craig.
Councillor Craig, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Waterfield, thank you. Is there any other nominations for chair and vice chair of this scrutiny committee? Okay. So we'll take the chair position first, and we have a nomination of Councillor Brooke and a nomination of Councillor Thompson. Can all those in favour of Councillor Brooke please show? And those in favour of Councillor Thompson? Thank you. So Councillor Thompson is elected as chair. For vice chair, we have nomination of Councillor Corley, and the other nomination is Councillor Craig. Can I have a show of hands in favour of Councillor Corley, please? And those in favour of Councillor Craig? Thank you. So Councillor Craig is nominated as Vice Chair. So the Chair and Vice Chair of the Climate and Environment Scrutiny and Improvement Committee will be Chair Councillor Thompson and Vice Chair Councillor Craig. The other memberships, can we also take those as read and general agreement, unless someone wishes to speak on those? Is everyone happy with those? Okay, so I'll take the silence as approval. Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 11 to consider motions, and we have one motion moved by Councillor Thompson and seconded by, I understand, Councillor Griffiths. Are you going to take your motion as read, Councillor Thompson, or would you like to read it out? Are you happy with that? The decision is yours.
I think, although this was not in the order paper, members will have had the opportunity to read through the text, and therefore I'm happy, Mr. Mayor, that we take the motion as read.
Okay. Seconder? Is that you, Councillor Griffiths?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Councillor Thompson, do you want to say anything first?
And as far as introducing the motion? Yes, thank you. Yes. So the motion, Mr. Mayor, is set out in some detail. And the rationale for setting out the detail is to attempt to address many of the issues that arise from the principle that's being asked to be adopted. Now, for those of you who know a Saltburn resident or who may be a Saltburn resident, you will be very familiar with the challenges that have been faced by residents who live in particular areas of Saltburn. Those being primarily residents of Marine Parade. However, the motion seeks to address an issue that is not just confined to Saltburn. It is an issue that appertains to other areas of the borough. So the motion is phrased not to be primarily specific to Marine Parade and Saltburn, but to allow all members the opportunity, if they so wish, to consider whether they have similar problems and can take advantage of the proposal that is before us today. Now, we have a policy of trying to increase areas of the borough in particular, but Saltburn in very much particular, to attract visitors. So our visitor destination plan is very, very focused on encouraging visitation by a whole range of visitors, not least those who travel in motorhomes. Now, in the past, there has not been much adequate, if any, provision for motorhome visitors to stay in specific planned areas. So, not surprisingly, they've taken advantage of those areas where there are no restrictions whatsoever and where there are advantages such as sea views. However, the environment of those residents who have to put up with, and I say that advisedly, the presence, which is now almost a permanent presence, of motorhomes, stroke motor caravans, is becoming a challenge really too much. So over the last 5 years, the number of motorhomes parked on Marine Parade almost permanently is becoming such that the ambience, the whole area has become changed. So no longer is it just a residential area, but it has become, in essence, a motorhome park. Now, people may say, well, right, you've chosen to live there, everyone has freedom of the highway, as long as the tax tester and MOT can park where they wish. And we accept that. However, by changing the essence of a quiet, although public area, 24 hours a day, that is quite a radical change to the environment. So the ask today is that we consider doing what a local authority has done near to us, North Yorkshire to be specific, where they have introduced no overnight parking. And the rationale is that people then do not stay almost permanently, and by staying almost permanently, it becomes their home, not just to live in, but the environment. So they party on the pavement. We may say there's nothing wrong with having a party. We're here to enjoy ourselves. But when that impacts on the neighborhood environment, we have to question that. Those, and there are some of them, not a majority, who empty their foul waste down drains. If there's no rain to wash it away, it stays there and stagnates. Some, again a minority, empty their effluent on the bank. It's not clean, it's an environmental pollutant. So we do not wish to discourage people from coming, and we wish to encourage them to do so, but we should be offering sensible, suitable places for stay. And one of these we've tried, as members will be aware, is at Catnab Car Park, where we've asked for the new design to incorporate official waste disposal facilities, fresh water, CCTV, free overnight parking. So all of these are on offer. So it's not, we're just saying, don't come, don't stay here. We're saying, do come, but stay in an area that's reasonably managed. So the actual practical side, Mr. Bear, if I can say, has already been established by North Yorkshire County. And in 2012, they actually delivered the provision of no overnight stay. This, unfortunately, was only on a temporary basis because there was no legislation that allowed that to happen. However, we are aware that in 2012, Robert Goodwood wrote to the then minister, who got approval from the Department of Transport to enact through authorization and special direction the implementation of traffic authority regulations, which then have subsequently been implemented since 2015 by Scarborough and North Yorkshire. And this allows the local authority to legitimately put up signage to discourage overnight parking in nominated streets and to be able to enforce that. Now, prior to that, full consultation has been undertaken by the local authority, with all interested parties. In other words, everyone who might be affected once nominated streets have been suggested as the areas of restriction. There is full public consultation over a period of whatever that might be, 3 months. And after the consultation, there will be an order placed. And that order would be similar to what Scarborough produced in 2015. and that was made under the 1984 Act, the Road Traffic Regulation Act, and also the 2004 Act, the Traffic Management Act. Now, those would be implemented. It will take time to do this if members this afternoon approve the principle for this to be further progressed. Given the time that it took Scarborough to implement it, with full consultation, with members first, nominating the areas that we wish to see management of, then consulting the residents to say whether they agree or not agree, and then agreeing an order that would come back to council in detail for council to then say this is what we wish to enact. So the last sentence of the motion looks at the prohibition of overnight parking restrictions in restriction of relevant locations identified through the consultation process, and to do so at the earliest opportunity, but at the latest by the 1st of April 2024. So that would give more than adequate time, in my opinion, for the full consultation, discussion, members, public, back to ourselves, before we came forward with a directive for implementation. So, Mr. Mayor, that's as brief as I can be, I think, in trying to give the background, the detail of the motion, and a target for implementation. So I would commend the motion to members. I do think, I do hope that they are understanding of the concerns of residents, particularly in Saltburn, and that they will support this motion to allow us then to begin to engage in an informed discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Does anyone else wish to speak on the motion? If I may take the liberty to say a few words in relation to it. Thank you, Councillor Thompson, for bringing this motion to full council. It has been an issue that has been ongoing for about 5 years now, and is one of the frequent complaints I receive as a ward councillor at Saltburn. For example, over the last bank holiday period, I counted 45 mobile homes parked along Marine Parade. Even a caravan had taken up camp with the car still attached. We're all aware of the issues that Saltburn does have in relation to parking, and we have taken measures over the years to try and ease that. But the problem we're having at the moment with this is not helping at all. Now, I do apologise, I can only speak on the issues that I have within the Saltburn ward, but I am aware that other areas within the borough are having the same issues as we are. I mean, some of the problems, as Councillor Thompson has said, chemical toilets, where are they emptying them? Well, there was evidence shown to us over the bank holiday weekend that they just emptied the chemical toilets out on the grass, which is not acceptable. The parking at times is just a disgrace. They park on the pavement so that the vehicle is level. It sometimes does block the pavement. Obviously, it's a police matter, but they don't. It's a low priority for them. Recently, I took a party around the town explaining the historic features of it. And before I went on to Marine Parade, I apologised to them in what they were going to see. And lo and behold, here was a camper. They were all sat out on the pavement, as Councillor Thompson has, and they had a fire pit on the pavement. And they were all sat round it. Lack of privacy for residents, and obviously there is antisocial behaviour. Where are they depositing the rubbish? Obviously, anywhere that they can find. And I even know 1 or 2 residents, which is an absolute disgrace, park their camper van on Marine Parade so it's not stuck outside their house. And they're Saltburn residents. So, it's a sad that Councillor Thompson had to bring this motion to the council. We've been promised over the years by various officers that he'll be dealt with, and they've supposedly looked at other areas, other boroughs, how they deal with that issue. They obviously, sad to say, it doesn't appear so, because Councillor Thompson has come up with an example that Scarborough now implement. I mean, we were even promised a public space protection order which would have dealt with that, but then that has just fallen by the by. So thank you, Councillor Thompson, for bringing this motion to the council, and I fully support it, and I hope other councillors will as well. Councillor Hannaway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you said it all, really. I just wanted to mention that obviously those banks that get so horrible with, you know, the beer cans and the packaging for barbecue meats and the chemical toilets and everything else, they're not cleaned by the council because they're regarded as too hazardous because of the steepness. And so it's left to volunteers to scramble around on the banks trying to get to a plastic bag that's in the middle of like a bindweed bush. So it's a very difficult situation. So if it is possible, you know, by the route that you've described, and if they've done it for Scarborough, I don't really see why they can't do it for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannaway. Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gosh, this is an ongoing issue that I know when I was in my other post that we dealt with. I know there was issues on the stray with regards to this. It's a very difficult scenario because basically we want people to come into our area. We need people to come into our area. We've just had a bike race that showcased what an amazing place we actually live in. But then we're saying we don't want overnight parking. So I think I understand the difficulties that's on Marine Parade, and I think one of the difficulties, don't shoot me down right now, is it's not pay to park. So people couldn't leave their vehicles there all day, every day, if it was pay to park, which is the implication we put in on the stray, which have been an ongoing issue. So I think that may be something else. I think we need to be really careful as a borough that if we're going to discourage overnight parking in specific areas, that we're actually going to discourage people coming to see what we have on offer when we're trying to encourage tourism. I do think the free parking is a massive, massive issue, and I'm going to look at Councillor Foggo, and perhaps this is something that we need to take up that would alleviate that problem. I think it's appalling that the residents are actually taking advantage. You're here fighting for your residents. We've got residents parking their own motorhomes on there because it's free to park, and they don't live outside their own homes. You know, I also believe that, as Councillor Foggo has also mentioned, that we've got very stretched services. How on earth are we going to be able to enforce all this? So I think we need to look at measures. I'm not particularly sure that we need to follow other local authorities, as I don't necessarily feel. I feel we tend to be a follower and not coming up with something of our own. So I feel that we perhaps need to look at other ideas and how we can do that. I also think we need to provide more facilities for these people. You know, I think it's absolutely disgraceful that people could put their waste in inappropriate places. But I also believe that as a borough, if we're going to encourage this, which we need this to our area, that we need to providing better facilities, which we've had this issue over at Cowbar that we've tried to resolve. So I think the issue isn't, I don't think the way forward personally is to stop overnight parking. I think we need to address the other issues like pay to park and offering facilities. And whilst I do appreciate Saltburn's a beautiful place, unfortunately we can't take that away from you guys, and I appreciate as a ward councillor it must be very difficult, but you live in an area that that's the forefront of what we have to offer in our area. So I think we need to put other measures in place and not stop overnight parking. So unfortunately, Councillor Thompson, I do respect what you're doing, but I can't support it to actually look at cancelling that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Craig. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank Philip for bringing this motion to the council, because again, this is another groundhog issue that we have. I just think it's a shame that 2022, a borough that's like relies on tourism and as a coastal towns, we don't have a better provision for these camper vans and motorhomes. So, I mean, broadly speaking, the Labour group can support Philip's motion, just with the caveat that we don't want to appear to the wider world that we're closed off to visitors to the borough. I do have a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Craig just said there with some of the issues. It's a very different coastline, isn't it? So, for instance, South Gare, PD Ports is like an unofficial motorhome community there that don't cause any harm to anybody, but in Saltburn it's such a small area that, I mean, I'm surprised to find that residents are parking their own camper vans in these areas, which I'm sure there's more on top of. So yeah, broadly speak, we are in support of the consultation. However, we definitely need to explore the designated areas for motorhomes because as a borough, visitors are vital to our growing local economy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Coming from a little village that, well, was adopted, that has a little car park, and it only takes 6 or 7 camper vans to fill it up, and we have a beach which is second to none, which is used by a lot of people. A lot of people come with the cars. We have a big parking problem down there, which truthfully, since we've got the permit parking and the yellow lines, has done its job, but that still doesn't help the little car park. But our car park doesn't tend to have camper vans parking all day. They tend to turn up at night en route to other places and do it because it's free. We have a nice toilets down there, and the same thing, the dump stuff and everything. Not everybody's great. Some of them are. I have no objection to people with camper vans, but they're actually coming to our area because it's free. And who wouldn't? You know, you're there, parked right on this, practically on the sea, overnight. You're not doing anybody any harm. But they are taking residents get annoyed because of the carry, you know. I say they're not doing any harm, they're not. But they are taking up the big spaces. And I do appreciate the problems you have in Saltburn, having lived in Saltburn as well. And it has been for a lot of years. And having, same as Councillor Craig, having that in my position once, dealing with Cowbar and that, they don't park in stairs because they've got to pay the parking Cowbar. There's a lot of things goes on. Anyway, I'm going to support the motion. So.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the motion's very well thought out and covers things. I certainly agree with Councillor Brown. We need to look at facilities and improving the offer that we have for camper vans. Being in the next ward to Saltburn, I get phone calls from people all the time about Marine Parade, even though it doesn't fall in my remit. And the car parking situation on the Coast Road, well, that doesn't fall into my ward. It appears everybody thinks it does. It's actually in Longbeck. We've had camper vans staying there, not moving for 3 months, which is also possible that could happen in Saltburn. I know it's a huge issue, and it does need a full consultation, and I think it's a well thought out motion, and I'll be happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. Just think we've got that one's off. We've got such an increase in touring that it might be worth investing in the development of something in Saltburn. We've got the rugby club at Redcar, Newmask Sports Club's just opened, touring pitches, the Yorkshire Lass at Newmask. It's a bit of an emerging industry, and if we're going to push them off the roads, offering them somewhere paid to go could be a good opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With reference to the people parking along the Stray, yes, part of it is in my ward, and I get lots and lots of complaints about it because, as Councillor King says, people can park there for literally months on end. I thank Councillor Thompson for his motion. I mean, one of Councillor Craig's objections was the fact that we need more facilities, but as has just been mentioned, we have facilities at the rugby club and in various other places. And what happens is that people don't want to pay for the rugby club, so they park in the stray car parks. Now, since April, we've been promised, and I have to say, Councillor Foggo, in your report it says it's been completed, but it hasn't. It was agreed that we would have charges for overnight camping for any vehicle, not just camper vans. We still haven't got the machines which would put that into effect, so they're still parking there. And I am very conscious of the fact that once that actually is implemented, then what will happen is we'll get even more camper vans parking on the stray by the side of the road, because of course it's free. So I very much agree with what Councillor Thompson has said, and I certainly think it's something we need to look at throughout the whole borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Glyn Nightingale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope you'll realise that by the time I finish speaking that I'm sympathetic with the issue that's been raised and the problems that need action. But I think it is time that we had motions that are much more operational so that officers can be clear what the council is actually telling them to do. Previously we had a motion that just said the council believes. Well, belief isn't the truth and it isn't operational. And this motion is another example of lack of clarity and about what we're actually trying to do, and also pretty loose, even lacking in more clarity on how we're going to do it. It talks about specific areas, it doesn't say which specific areas. It says consider enacting overnight no parking restrictions, nominated and agreed areas, it doesn't say which. Further down, well, it repeats that same message, and it says all elected members will be consulted. It doesn't actually say how. Neither does it say the full consultation subsequently required. Presumably that's with the public. It doesn't say what form, how, and who is going to be consulted. And then finally, the real meat is in the final paragraph. But it says any necessary approval. It's a little, it really is a bit vague. And then it goes on at the earliest opportunity with a timescale, which is again quite reasonable. But I just want to reiterate that if we are going to get the officers to do the job that we want them to do, any motion from the council should be far, far more precise. Really, we don't need an essay in terms of the what we're trying to do. Again, I'll repeat, like a lot of other members, I'm sympathetic in terms of what we're trying to achieve and the overall objective. But let's have motions that actually tell officers what we want them to do more precisely.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. Councillor Kay.
Yes, resolves is the word you're looking for. Yes, I've had some trouble with my Councillor Quartermain's crabs and lobsters, because do you remember we swapped it around a bit at the last council meeting, and it says believes, it should say resolves. So I think we should remember that. If we're telling officers what to do, as Councillor Nightingale says, let's make it
Councillor Kay, please speak
clear.
On the motion, please.
Let's make it absolutely clear what we want. Now, these people, in my opinion, are taking the mick. If they acted reasonably and behaved reasonably, then there wouldn't be a problem. But it seems to be the way of the world nowadays that if people see a chink in your armour, they're straight through it. And, it's absolutely unreasonable to camp out for days on end, or possibly weeks on end, on the front at any of our coastal destinations. It's wrong, and they must know so. If they're blocking the pavement, putting fires on the pavement, dining on the pavement, they must know it's out of order, and actually we could do something about that now. If they're throwing their effluent down the bank side, they know it's wrong. They're just taking the mick. And I support Councillor Thompson totally. I don't think we should, it may be a bit loose, but I think the officers will get the message. And I don't want to mess about anymore, waiting till the next council to have another resolution. Personally, I'd bring it in April 23, not April 24. Why suffer for another summer? But I'll leave that to you. I don't represent Saltburn, but I'm always impatient to put things right and quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to give some information on the stray car parks, the arrangements are complete because all the TROs are through, the machines have been ordered, they are arriving in the next few days, and they will be installed this month.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Councillor Bill Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's in essence it's a very good idea, but the question I would have about is how you're going to enforce it. They're either going to, you're going to have these areas which are going to be closed off. They'll only move to somewhere else. Got great experience of this with, very sadly, the travelling community. They're not daft. They'll park anywhere, and they're not bothered. But how are you going to enforce it? I understand if the travelling community are going to be there, you've got to go to court, get some kind of court order to say you're going to move, and they'll eventually move on. So you're going to have to be careful that you don't cross-contaminate one policy with another policy about the travelling community and the motorhomes. It's going to be a very difficult matter to start, and Councillor Nightingale said, quite rightly, there's a lack of detail there, but to me, it's the enforcement of it. How are you going to move people on if you find them illegally parked in an area that's designated not for parking? So whether I back it or not, I don't know, but that's my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Thompson, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to apologise unduly. I tried to encapsulate the essence, the principles within the motion. So the fact that you encouraged me to have it read, Chair, was indicative of the length of the motion, if not necessarily the detail of the narrative. I could instead have put a 17-page motion in, which hopefully would have addressed some of the concerns of some members, which would reflect on what North Yorkshire did in terms of their directive when they brought it back to committee. So if we are of a mind to pass the principle this afternoon, at a future meeting there will be a 17 or 18, even a 20-page document for members to consider. So this afternoon I would ask members to think about the principle. Now, we've had some detailed reservations expressed, and I respect those. One is we should not be discouraging members from coming to the borough. I agree. I think perhaps I've done personally more than any other member of this chamber to bring visitors to the borough. When I established the Saltburn Victorian Week in 1986 and ran that for 10 years, the number of visitors to Saltburn increased from 10,000 to over 1.5 million. So the evidence is there that we do want visitors to come to Saltburn. However, we do need to do this on a considered basis. We need to listen to our residents. And if a resident on Marine Parade said that I am now living in a motorhome caravan park, that is not right, is it? So the motion does say that we should offer encouragement to visitors. We do that. The motion does say that we should be taking advantage of facilities and creating facilities for visitors and motor caravans to enjoy. Read the motion. So what we have done so far is, in Saltburn at least, we have had the discussion about investing somewhere near £500,000 in Catnab car park. Now, unfortunately, that investment only produced 4 overnight motorhome spaces. Originally, we had 8. So I think we need to rethink our capital programme as to actually what we are doing specifically to encourage motorhome stay. That is going to be ameliorated, I understand, Chair, by a special TRO that's going to come in overnight that will allow motorhomes to park outside a conventional car parking space. So hopefully that will address that issue. But I reiterate, we are providing in that facility waste disposal. I reiterate, we are providing fresh water. I reiterate, we are providing CCTV coverage, currently at no charge. Now, no charge. So why are more people not going there and take advantage of it? Because there are other choices. What this motion attempts to do is to say we want to restrict one of those choices by nominating specific streets where we say, please don't park overnight. That's the simple ask. Now that will be done through consultation with all the members of the public. They will have the opportunity of nominating the street. All ward members will have the opportunity of saying, in my ward, there are these issues. Please have a look at them. So there will be a collective discussion. I hope I've answered some of the points. I have not got time, Mr. Mayor, with respect to your timing, and I appreciate that, to answer all of the specific points that have been brought up. They will be addressed. So, best practice, it's only down the road. Let us take recognition of that and follow good leadership, good practice, and reap the rewards of implementing it. Therefore, I commend this motion this afternoon, Mr. Mayor, to members, and I do hope that they will accept the principle and share in the delivery of it.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I will now take a vote. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Those against? Those who wish to abstain? Okay, thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 12, sorry, we've done that. Item 13 is to reply to questions from members of the council. Yes. Well, I'm going. Yeah. Question 1 is from Councillor Lockwood to Councillor Foggo, Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport. Do we have general agreement that we'll take the questions as read? Thank you. Councillor Foggo, would you like to reply to Councillor Lockwood?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Lockwood. Council is responsible for maintaining the roads, footpaths and associated infrastructure within the borough, which is defined as the adopted highway. Adopted highways means highway maintainable at the public expense, as defined in Section 329 of the Highways Act 1980. Council is also responsible for the maintenance of walls, paths and roads in the Council's parks, open spaces and cemeteries, which, although not part of the adopted highway network, are still assets that need to be maintained. There are other roads within the borough which are not owned by the council and would be defined as private roads. There may be occasions where it is difficult to determine the ownership of some of the roads, with the added complication that they may not be constructed to a standard that would enable them to be adopted by the council. For a short period of time, a budget had been allocated to carry out repairs to private unadopted roads due to the impact on local communities. However, this has now stopped due to other service priorities. The Highways capital allocation is made up from two grant allocations from government, which was further added to with some of the council's own resources, which were sourced and maintained through prudential borrowing. It was this additional council resource that was targeted to work on the wider road infrastructure to resolve some substandard neighbourhood estates, but only to an acceptable level and not a more expensive adoptable road standard, which was identified as one of the council's priorities in improving the physical appearance of the borough.
Councillor Lockwood, do you have a supplementary question? And can I just remind you that it's you have 1 minute.
Thank you for that, Councillor Foggo. Earlier this year, the Leader of the Council was made aware of anomalies in the authorisation for spending a substantial amount of money from the 2021-22 Highways maintenance budget on resurfacing unadopted alleyways in Lockwood Ward. The Leader said that the person responsible for the irregularity in the authorisation procedure was an officer who is no longer with the Council, and that there were emails and a paper trail to prove this. Despite agreeing at the time to make this paper trail available to members, and in spite of several requests since, the emails are still not available. So that the workings of this council can be seen to be open and transparent, and because after over 6 months it now seems unlikely that the said paper trail will ever actually materialise, do you think it would now be appropriate to now hold an inquiry so that the following questions can be determined? Why was this work seen as a priority over normal highways maintenance? Why the relevant cabinet member wasn't aware of the work? Why the work was stopped as soon as the cabinet member's successor became aware of the work? What was the substantial amount of money that the original budget authorisation was for, and now how much was actually spent before it was stopped? Why there was no cost code for this budget?
Councillor Lockwood, I hope there isn't many more questions you're going to ask, because you're well out of time.
And the final question, and who actually gave the authorisation for the money to be spent and the work to be carried out? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lockwood. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are quite a number of questions there, which the main one you asked for was an investigation into it. As far as an investigation is concerned, I would suspect it would have to be implemented through council chamber. The questions that you've asked there, I don't know the answers to. So if you want to put them to me in writing, I will see what I can do on responding to them. But I would suspect that a lot of them are not to do with my side of things, but also to do with finance side that you've mentioned there. So if you send them to me, I will see what I can come up with.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Before I bring on question 2, I've had a request from Councillor Pallister if we could bring her 2 questions forward. She has to attend a meeting very shortly, and she wants to swap with Councillor Brady in relation to the order. Do I have agreement that that can be done, please, councillors? Thank you. Councillor Pallister, we'll take your first question, if you bear with me a moment. And it's to Councillor Gallagher, of Cabinet Member for Economic Growth. I understand Councillor Lanigan is going to answer in his absence. Councillor Lanigan, would you like to answer the question that has been put forward by Councillor Pallister?
Very much indeed. Do we know what question number it was? Because I've got Councillor Pallister down for question 9.
It's question 8.
Question 8. I do apologise. There he is with my little sticker on. Thank you very much. The council is looking to central government and the new Prime Minister over the coming days to bring forward a comprehensive support package for households. I understand that there would be a meeting today, but of course we're in the chamber and I don't know what that is. And of course, depending on what is proposed, the council will adapt accordingly and support any implementation when required. In the meantime, the council business engagement team has regularly contact with a full range of businesses across the borough. The interaction intensified through COVID, as we're all aware. Once legal issues are resolved with companies towards the end of 2022, the business engagement team will start to utilise Redcar and Cleveland's enterprise funding package because of the crisis that we've got. This grant funding will support businesses seeking to modernise and be more efficient in areas including, although not limited to, improved production, digitisation, energy costs. This will directly assist local business implementation.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Councillor Pallister, do you have a supplementary question? Bit further forward, that's it, so we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, our local businesses, they do work long hours. They've put much of their own money into making it a success. And the hospitality industry and other small businesses are on the verge of collapse. The VCS organisations, which you did mention, continue to see an increase in people who need help. And what we don't want to see is pubs, shops, cafes, and the VCS who deliver to those most in need across our borough unable to access them vital support services. So obviously you've gone through the question. I am pleased that the announcement that I think is going through by the government is that they've taken Labour's policy and they're going to freeze utility bills and hopefully give help to some businesses now, and let's hope the VCS are included in that. So this won't all happen immediately.
Councillor Pallister,
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
I'm going to have to be fair to everyone. I interrupted Councillor Lockwood. You've had over your time. Get to your question.
This won't happen immediately. So in the meantime, how quick is the funding from the council that you mentioned going to get to businesses? Because it's very likely that some have closed and some will close very soon.
For that, I am not convinced by what central government is saying at the moment. I'm not convinced that there is going to be enough funding, whether that is just for gas and electric and for not just for businesses. There doesn't seem to be anything coming out at the moment about local authorities and what we are actually going to get from them. I haven't heard the Prime Minister or any of the ministers say that. The local authorities, and I actually had a meeting with the chair of the LGA who came up from London last week, and they are as concerned and they are lobbying where we are at the moment. Redcar and Cleveland Council will do everything it can. The last thing we want is for any business to close. That doesn't build an economy or anything going forward, and we'll move as quickly as we can, and we'll let the council know where we are with this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Your second question, which was question 9, Councillor Pallister, was to Councillor Kay, Cabinet Member for Health and Welfare. Councillor Kay, would you like to... Oh, sorry, my apologies.
That one.
Okay, Councillor Lanigan.
I'm fully aware of the crisis that we've got at the moment and how that's impacting on our residents through the borough. And the council has to be able to take a lead forward. I had a pre-meeting with Health and Wellbeing Board the other day. It was brought to their attention, not that it should have needed to be, but it was. We've involved the NHS and public health, and what we're going to do going forward, I've got a meeting next week with them, and this is top of the agenda going forward. The crisis, of course, and I'm sure that we're all well aware, it's a devastating effect on physical health as well as mental health going forward. We don't know how bad this crisis is going to get, and holding gas and electric at the rate that they're actually saying, between £2,000 and £2,500, is still going to cause devastation to these families. So where on earth people are going to find that, I don't know. And as Councillor Pallister has just said, with businesses, does that mean more people are out of work going forward? We already provide a number of services to support those in need. However, I think what we're going to find as a borough, that it's not just the people that we know there at the moment. I think we've got another tier there, and for everyone sat in this council chamber, with prices going up as whether you're working or not, whether you've got children or not, it's going to impact on all of us going forward. The meeting of the Live Well South Tees Board is taking place, as I've said, and I'm going to announce quite shortly the initial package of support in advance of that meeting. And they are coming to, I'm setting up a task and finish group, and the Health and Wellbeing Board, because of the information coming in there, we've got to be well aware of that, and it will move quickly. We can't afford as a borough to be on the back foot with this, because we don't know what's coming around the corner at us, and I'm not convinced central government at the moment have got all the answers. And I know the Prime Minister has just gone into place with their new cabinet there, but we're going to hit crisis pretty quickly going forward. It's not just the businesses, and we will make sure that we do everything we can, but that will be, I will let council know exactly where we are with the finish board and everybody else that we're pulling together now. And it shouldn't have been for me to actually have to take that to the Health and Wellbeing Board to say, look, we've got a crisis looming here, what are we doing about it? They've agreed with that. We're working alongside Middlesbrough with that, and with all the executives that are involved in that, and public health, and I should have some answers for you pretty quickly. Another voluntary sector that we've actually got there, we can't do without them, and Redcar and Cleveland Council will be opening up whatever they need to do to take this forward, just like we did with COVID, and everybody on board, because this isn't a political thing. This is about every single one of us being out there and helping the residents going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Councillor Pallister, do you have a supplementary question?
Well, so on the 1st of September, the Health and Wellbeing Board finally met to develop a plan to assist residents in Redcar, Cleveland and Middlesbrough with a rising cost of living. The leader then puts in her email, we cannot be complacent and we need to be absolutely on the front foot. Really? We're really on the back foot. Sorry to say. Nearly 4 months ago I raised this at the Adult Communities and Scrutiny Committee. The question to the Director of Public Health for South Tees was, what was the Health and Wellbeing Board doing to address the cost of living crisis? We have senior representation from our leaders, our cabinet members, the NHS, the DWP, Tees Esquire Valley Housing Police, all in a position to make people's lives better, and all have the powers to do that quickly. And we already know that we live. Middlesbrough and Redcar and Cleveland has the most deprived wards in the country. So people are already struggling. They're already living in poverty. And we wait till last week to even discuss a plan. I was hoping that your first question you would say we've got grants available, they're all going out to businesses, and within 2 weeks we know exactly who they are, what the problems, how much they need, and so on, and what support they need. But that didn't come from the first question.
Councillor Pallister, sorry, I know it is a very important subject, but I'll give you over your allocated
Right,
time.
okay then, 'cause
And I've
this-
got to be fair to everyone. So get around to asking your question, please.
We've all seen that there was going to be a cost of living crisis for a long time, so it's really now, you know, I cannot believe it's taken this long to get round the table to discuss the most important issue that our residents face. So now, how soon will people get the help they desperately need? There should have already been a plan in place months ago.
I can only apologise about that. I didn't know that you brought this up at scrutiny, and when I brought this up at the pre-meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board, nobody, because I wasn't at the last one because I was at a funeral, so nobody said to me this has already been brought to the fore, and it wasn't even on the agenda for the next Health and Wellbeing Board. Yes, so it is now, and it's at the forefront of that, and I've asked them all that were sat on that pre-agenda meeting to go away, because what I don't want is, when I go to the Health and Wellbeing Board, they'll say, well, we'll go and have a look. I need them to have a look now. There's no point delaying it another week and then say, well, we'll go and see. That's no good. So it's public health and NHS.
Lynn, sorry, it's not a debate. Let Councillor Lanigan answer the question.
Well, I'm quite sure, Councillor Pallister, that they are. And you've already mentioned Middlesbrough and Redcar and Cleveland. We all know that we've got deprivation within our areas, which is going to increase going forward. But I will make sure that we'll do that as quickly as we possibly can to do this. And I can only apologise for, from public health, that we've actually got, nothing was brought to the fore, and it wasn't on the agenda even for the next meeting. And I said, just a minute, what are we doing about this? Right.
Councillor Lanigan, have you finished?
Yes, I have. But I will make sure that all members are brought up to speed as to what's happened with this, and I can only apologise on behalf of public health.
Thank you, Councillor Pallister, for your questions. Moving on to the next question, and we'll go to question 4, which is a question from Councillor Brown to Councillor Gallagher, but I presume Councillor Lanigan is going to answer this. Take it as read. Would you like to reply to Councillor Brown's question?
Thank you for your question. The region will be a major asset for the whole borough, and we're delighted to have the major national operator in Merlin. We are working closely with the operator and confirm that we will be making alterations to the lobby to fit Merlin's operating model. Making minor operations to accommodate the operator's individual requirements was always expected and has been budgeted for. The overall project has been delivered in budget, including alterations now being undertaken. We don't have final costings for the works, but there is currently a circa of over £200,000 of budgeted provision remaining, although we anticipated the actual cost will be well below that going forward. Recruitment and training of the Merlin team and licensing is currently underway and aligns with minor work schedules, as these alterations will not result in any delay with the venue opening. And I can just say that we've had over 700 applicants and everyone is now in place.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Councillor Brown, do you have a supplementary?
I do, but I've got an extra supplementary now. So can you just confirm, Mary?
It has to be confined into one question, please.
Can you confirm some of these points, please, Councillor Lanigan? Firstly, that there was a £200,000 original underspend on the build, and secondly, let me find this. Right, okay. So the supplement, Merlin has described how the cinema will have to be altered to make the service. We understand that for the service. But why was the cinema originally built with a theatre style, art style foyer as opposed to a cinema foyer? Was this an oversight or preemptive? The foyer has also been described as having no space for food sales, and the ticket desk location will make it unpleasant for queuing patrons because of the swinging doors. The bar service area was described by the new operator as tiny, a challenge and chaotic, and without a cold cellar. Bearing these comments in mind, why wasn't any of this picked up at the planning stage, and why did you sign it off without paying attention to these important details? Thank you.
Thank you much for that. Yes, I can confirm that there is currently a circa of 200,000 that we've got. Can't answer the other questions, and I suppose as leader of the council, I know this isn't my portfolio of this. When planning and everything went in, it was designed for the small cinema that it was. Sometimes when you get operators in, they want that changing. It actually seems that you've got quite a list from them to say this isn't right or that isn't right. My understanding of this, that this will be moved quite quickly and the cinema will be opening as per schedule going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Moving on to question 5, which is from Councillor Thompson to Councillor Kay, Cabinet Member for Health and Welfare. Are you answering this one, Councillor Kay? Thank you.
In accordance with the Bathing Water Regulations 2013, the Environment Agency has a duty to sample bathing waters leading up to the start of the bathing water season, the 15th of May. They continue sampling in accordance with the monitoring calendar until the end of the season, the 30th of September. This is usually 1 sample per week per designated beach in Redcar and Cleveland. And the beaches which are designated are Redcar Coton, Redcar Lifeboat, Redcar Granville, Redcar Stray, Mask and Saltburn. The sampling point must be located where most bathers are expected, and there is no requirement to have more than 1 sampling point at each designated beach. The cause of high levels of intestinal enterococci, I've checked with my medical friend, she's gone now, how to pronounce that, by the way, in case you're wondering, and E. coli present in the Saltburn sample taken on the 22nd of August 22. It was not attributed to any known cause other than environmental influences, such as rainfall, sea turbulence, land runoff, seaweed decay, bird droppings, water temperature. The Bathing Water Quality website states that intestinal enterococci and E. coli present in bathing water. Sorry, I'll start again. They come from many sources, including sewage, agriculture, livestock, wildlife, birds and road drainage. Discussions were held with the Environment Agency during 20 to 21, where it was advised that sample results are only valid on the day they are obtained. It is the long-term calculation of results over a 4-year period that determines the classification of bathing water. Obtaining an extra sample from an additional sampling point would only show the water quality on that particular day at that one point, and presently there is insufficient evidence to suggest the water quality at Saltburn is poor and requires extra sampling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Thompson, do you have a supplementary question?
Sorry. Thank you, Mayor. Given the answer that was provided, it did not address the question. That's my first observation, if I may, Mr. Mayor. The question was, can these additional costs be advised so that a considered evaluation of the benefit of such sampling can be made? That was the question. The question was not answered. I've had an answer, so I accept the answer, but it did not address the question. My supplementary question is, given that we do not know the answer to the first question, it is very difficult for me to pose a supplementary. However, I will take on board the observations that were made in respect of the answer. What we are aware of, Mr. Mayor, is that the sample that is currently taken does not get taken where there is clear entry into the sea of known pollutant supply, i.e. at Pitt Hills Stell. Given that we know that, given that the sampling does not take place currently within the blue flag area of which we are so proud, the validation of that is therefore very difficult to justify. Given that the monitoring calendar...
Councillor Thompson, I know you've said that it may be difficult to get a question to Councillor Kay, but try and construct one, and then, because your time is well over.
Thank you, Mayor, for your guidance. So, given the inadequacy of the answer to my question, could I have in writing the answer so that we can then have a subsequent discussion about the merits of additional sampling? Thank you.
I think I can answer that without giving you anything in writing. Yeah, you have to understand here, we aren't the people who do the testing. Because we get a report every week, and it's usually excellent or good, because we get this report every week, doesn't mean that we are doing it. The Environment Agency do these tests, and they come to their own conclusions. In addition to that, it has to be done in a bathing water area, and the Environment Agency decide which are the bathing water areas. Pitt Hills Stell is not a location where most people bathe, and therefore does not meet the bathing water requirements. So the Environment Agency are never going to go there to test, because it's not an appropriate place. It's not where people generally bathe. This is all to do with bathing waters, not general pollution of the sea.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Question 6 is again from Councillor Thompson to Councillor Gallagher, Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood and Housing, and I presume Councillor Lanigan is going to answer this question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'd be sick of me popping them down here. Councillor Thompson, the adoption of the Conservation Management Plan and Article 4 direction serve a dual purpose. One, more effective application of local plan policy in decision making on applications and meeting the requirement of planning regulations to ensure that new development meets the legal tests. And of course the extension of planning powers within Article 4 area so that specific minor works are the subject of planning control where they otherwise would not be. Members will recall that prior to the adoption of Article 4 direction, concerns were expressed that the measures would increase the number of enforcement cases and no increase in planning enforcement capacity. Officers consulted with other councils, notably Middlesbrough, where a similar Article 4 direction had been adopted, and the evidence confirmed that whilst there was a slight increase in the number of enforcement cases, this was not excessive and did not place an additional unsubstantial burden on planning. The delivery of planning enforcement is fully delegated to appropriate officers. The Council has an adoptive enforcement policy and established procedures for dealing with these cases. It employs a full-time senior enforcement officer who conducts the initial investigations, and the final decision on enforcement action is taken by the Development Service Manager. In addition, planning case officers may have a role in enforcement cases, along with specialised officers. The adoption of Article 4 Direction and Management Plan do not prioritise enforcement in Saltburn at the expense of the remainder of the borough. All complaints are recorded and investigated in accordance with adoptive procedures, and there is necessarily a requirement, of course, to prioritise some cases over others. It's critical that, in effect, enforcement is to take place, the correct planning and legal procedures are followed, and officers recognise that this can result in some cases taking quite a period of time to resolve. It's also the case the majority of complaints are resolved through negotiation without the need for formal action, and this can also affect the timeline in resolution. And of course we did have, and I know that people are saying, but we did have the COVID problems that we had. All the current reported breaches of control in Saltburn are recorded and are the subject of investigation or action, and the regulatory committee receive as part of the committee agenda. It is recognised that there is pressure on enforcement and sometimes being effectively managed in line with adoptive practices. At the present time, and given resource constraints, there is no immediate prospect of expanding the resources specifically allocated to planning and enforcement. However, any future review of service provision in the planning and development service area will consider enforcement resources and look at it providing additional capacity going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Councillor Thompson, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having received the answer that there is no intention of the local authority to consider in the short term any establishment increase, which is contrary to the guidance that ward members were and have been given in the recent period of at least 1.5 years, that is a disappointment. So my second question then, supplementary, Mr. Mayor, is given the answer where there is going to be no in the short term reconsideration, can I ask that this remain on the table as a high priority so that Saltburn's Article 4 is fully respected and that it is seen in its own right and not considered to be an aspect that is at the expense of other areas of the borough? It should be judged on its own merit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Lanigan.
And I will make sure that the Cabinet member is fully aware of that, along with our officers, and if necessary to contact you directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 7 is again from Councillor Thompson to Councillor Foggo, the Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following previous requests for measures in this location via ward members and residents, various highway improvements works have been undertaken. These include widening of the footway on the approach to the bridge. This was achieved by extending the curb line into the carriageway to extend the footway width and narrow the carriageway. It's not possible to widen the footway from the eastern side due to the highway constraints, that is, the bridge, drop-in level and network rail land. The footway was widened as much as possible to maintain two-way flow and prevent larger vehicles encroaching the opposite lane at the corner. This also had the benefit of reducing the carriageway width to help encourage reduced speeds. 20-mile-per-hour speed limit at school times indicated by 20-mile-per-hour when lights flash signs erected on each approach to school. 30-mile-per-hour speed limit extended west on Gisborough Road adjacent to the golf club to reduce speed on traffic prior to entering the built-up area. Speed activated 30-mile-per-hour sign with slow down message installed on Gisborough Road adjacent to golf club. 30-mile-per-hour signs erected on high visibility backing board to increase prominence of signs. 30 mph roundel markings on red high friction surfacing on Gisborough Road. Fencing on Gisborough Road, Marsk Mill Lane, north-west side, replaced with new fencing. The above measures were implemented to supplement to existing measures, which include 2 bend junction warning signs on each side of the carriageway on Gisborough Road, 1 junction warning sign on Gisborough Road, 3 slow markings on Gisborough Road, approach to Marsk Mill Lane, 3 school warning signs on Marsk Mill Lane, pedestrians crossing 150-yard sign and plate on each approach to crossing on Marsk Mill Lane. In relation to the request for further measures, I have the following responses. No loading at any time restrictions on single pavement. As there are no properties or businesses located adjacent to this footway, I'm not sure the reasoning for this request. We are not aware of any issue with vehicles loading in this location. There are double yellow lines already in place to prevent parking. 20 mph restriction on this section of highway during school opening and closing periods. This is already in place at school times via the 20 mph when lights flash signs. However, please note the eastbound approach sign and post on Gisborough Road was damaged and requires replacing. This work is being programmed accordingly as we now have the relevant procurement approval in place for the purchase of the replacement sign. Flashing light system to warn of approach to school. We already have that with the 20 mph signs. Slow signage on the highway approaches. As already stated, there are 3 sets of slow markings already in place on Gisborough Road, approach as detailed above. Marsk Mill Lane speeds are already reduced as vehicles enter the Windsor Road junction. And then there's a bus stop clearway marking and pedestrian crossing with zigzag markings. There's little space for additional slow markings. Correction of the erroneous signage advising of distance to the pedestrian crossing. The guidance suggests that a distance plate should not be necessary for this type of use, particularly as the crossing is visible ahead. The guidance suggests a sign isn't required based on the forward visibility. However, I would recommend removing the incorrect distance plate and maintaining the sign given it's already in place. Revealing the school sign, which is quite invisible to approaching traffic. This has been passed to neighbourhood teams to cut back vegetation.
Councillor Thompson, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Fogel, for your answer. I would just remind members of the policy that we've just agreed in the report, which says safety of highway users is of paramount importance. And I do not think that the reply from the officers given to the portfolio holder reflects that sentiment. My question relates, supplementary question, Chair, says, first of all, that the road width is not an issue. It continually gets put forward as a rationale for not doing anything. So, in answer to the question about there being no loading restrictions on the single pavement at any time, every ward member, Mr. Mayor, has written to, has telephoned, has visited the highways section saying that there is repeated infringement of parking on that double yellow line. Every ward member will refute what you have just been advised. That is so erroneous, Mr. Mayor, that I really regret the fact that you've been asked to repeat that. So my question, Mr. Mayor, begins. Please reconsider the no loading at any time restriction based on the infringement that we are experiencing. I request that the information given to revealing the school sign is done immediately. School has been already commenced, and yet we have done nothing despite requests from ward members to reveal the signage. The erroneous signage which
Councillor Thompson, I appreciate this these questions are very close to my heart, but to be fair to everyone else, please get to you've got your question. Can we bring it to a conclusion, please?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, again for your guidance. I am not satisfied at all with the answers that the portfolio holder has been given by the department, so I will write in detail with my supplementary questions and share them with all members.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Foggo.
Well, what you actually said there, Councillor Thompson, was that people were parking on the double yellow lines, right? That is not loading, right? Loading is for delivery vehicles, restricts.
Councillor Thompson, it isn't a debate. I'm sure you can...
Just listen to what
Hang on, Councillor Foggo. I'm sure you can put in your question email, explain the circumstances that are happening there. Councillor Foggo.
Right, if it's double yellow lines, no one is allowed to park there, and therefore it's up to the enforcement people to enforce the no parking there. As far as the signage on the road itself, as the officers have said, there's no room for many more signs available. There are already signs on the road to restrict to 20 miles per hour, and therefore we cannot see how you can improve on the safety with any more signage. All it would do would make the area so congested that nobody would be able to see the signs.
The no 20 miles an hour signs. Right, Councillor Brady, thank you for your patience. We now revert back to question 2, which is from you to Councillor Lanigan, Leader of the Council. Councillor Lanigan.
About that, Councillor Brady, I'm looking for you here because I've got a pile of them, and I do apologise. And that's my fault because I've packed them all away. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I know I'm holding you up here. I do apologise. I found you. They have got stickers on. So I forgot about you right at the bottom. I do apologise, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your question. This is quite complex, and we've got a dynamic situation on a global scale, let alone nationally or locally. Supply chains are struggling to meet post-pandemic demand. This added to, by the way, the conflict that we've got in Ukraine, and it's causing biggest inflation increases that we've seen in the past 40 years. Because of the issues at play, the situation is very volatile. Bodies like the Office for Budget Responsibility, Institute for Fiscal Studies, and the Bank of England have had to continually revise their forecasts on inflation, interest rates, and, of course, economic growth. The position remains difficult to predict, and governments will need to keep the situation under review as it develops and adjust their responses accordingly. The average weekly wage in Redcar Cleveland is £511 per week. That was of March 22, and CPI inflation has increased over the last 4 months by 3.1% at the end of July 2022, an increase of circa £16 a week based on and in employment population is 55,600, and that's a crude estimate, has Redcar and Cleveland shortfall of £890,000 per week, or £835 per individual each year. This naturally is based on a lot of assumptions that we've actually got, and averages of course will generally not be representative on an individual basis. I know how you're concerned, as everyone is concerned about this, and we really don't know, and we're only taking an estimate that we can to mitigate any shortfalls going forward. And I've actually explained in some of the answers that I've given here today, we have no idea what central government are going to do for local authorities. I have asked our MPs, and I know because they've had an election down there, everything that I'm asking at the moment, they're saying, can you wait till the new Prime Minister's in place? And so it's worrying. It's worrying for this authority. It's worrying for all authorities across the country where we are. It's worrying for the LGA, and that's why the chair came up to see me. I'm greatly concerned about children's services and overspends that we've got here. But what we've got to do is we're all going to have to pull together with this, because this is about our residents. But it is extremely concerning, and I do thank you for your question, because it needs to be out in the public domain.
Thank you. Before I bring in Councillor Brady, councillors, I have tried my best this afternoon. It's come to 5 o'clock. Allocated period is for 3 hours for Borough Council meetings. Are we happy to extend until the end of business for the day? Okay, thank you. Councillor Brady, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be quite quick with this one. I'm just wondering, what assessment has the authority, the administration, made of the potential use of reserves for their cost of living crisis?
I'm not going to give you a pat answer, Councillor Brady, on this. I think ongoing, because we don't know what's going to happen. We've got pay rises coming, which of course our staff actually deserve going forward. We've got a shortfall in children's services. The reserves that we've actually got, we need to make sure that we can spend some of those if that is necessary going forward. There's a lot of things happening at the moment. We don't know how much central government is going to allocate to local authorities, and right at this moment in time nobody's mentioning anything whatsoever. So whether because, and I'm quite sure that you know, sat on that side and sat on this side of the house where we are at the moment, we've never had, and central government have always not given us the money that is due to us going forward, whether that is population or anything, and we don't know whether they're going to cut us, whether they're going to hit us with elderly care services. I noticed that the new Prime Minister actually said that national insurance would be wiped out, that we wouldn't have to do it anymore. The main reason national insurance came in at that time was to look after elderly care, and that's why we were all supposed to be paying it. And what they're saying at the moment is, oh, well, I'm going to scrap that. So if they're going to scrap that, where does the money come for elderly care and NHS? Does that actually mean that this council won't be getting any increases except a few %, which we can't manage with? And then we're going to have to be looking at other services that we've got. And our responsibility is to those residents out there. And inflation is going through the roof. And we don't know as we head into winter how bad this is going to be. So from the reserves, Councillor Brady, I can't tell you that. until I get all this information in and Cabinet do. But we will come back to you. If we spend reserves in the difficult situation that we're in at the moment, where's that going to leave us as we run into winter with it? But I will keep you fully informed, and I am as concerned as everyone in this council chamber is with the current situation that we've got.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Your second question, Councillor Brady, is again to Councillor Lanigan. Councillor Lanigan, have you got that one ready? You have.
Yes, I do apologise. We know the government has a new Prime Minister now appointed. They're looking at emergency plans to address the cost of living. This is thought likely to include support for rising energy bills alongside reduction in taxation. We will wait to see the details of these plans, and I'm not quite sure, Councillor Brady, what's come out there today. We know that Redcar and Cleveland, alongside the North East and the North, more generally have relative high levels of deprivation, which increase the financial vulnerability of our communities to these. We would hope to see the government's response targeted to prioritise the most vulnerable. We have lobbied government many times on the need to level up through a more targeted approach in things like funding distribution and policy decisions, and I will continue to do that. We will also lobby government for the additional funding the local government sector needs to maintain the services provision of our most vulnerable that people rely on and current economic benefits. And I know, Councillor Brady, that I've gone on about this because it's a crisis. We're in a crisis now, but I do feel that it's going to get worse. I have been in touch with both our MPs. I have spoken to the LGA on several occasions with this. Everything seems over the last 8 weeks to have been put on the back burner. Now we've actually got a Prime Minister in place, and of course we have got Simon Clarke. He is the Levelling Up Minister, and he sits within our borders, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that, with both Redcar and the East Cleveland, Middlesbrough area that we've got. But I can absolutely assure you that the council will do everything it can within its financial constraints that we've got to help as many people as we can.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Councillor Brady, you have a supplementary question?
Can I thank the leader for her answer? Just a quick question. Can I ask if the leader will consider setting up a cross-party working group just to discuss and plan forward in the cost of living crisis, given that this is the biggest issue that we're currently facing?
Absolutely ideal, because it's going to affect every single one of us. And I think any information coming out of central government, that we're all going to need that. And it's what we can get out of central government. But I've got to tell you, Councillor Brady, I'm not holding my breath. He's going to go. And what we've got at the moment, and because they aren't taxing the big companies like BP and it looks as if central government are going to borrow billions of pounds, I can't see that there's going to be a great deal left for local government going forward with this or for our services. So I think as much as we lobby and we do whatever we can do to do that, I think we may be shortchanged. And I think what the government is to pay bills to £2,500 a year, which is an astronomical amount, which is actually going to push people into debt anyway. And I'm not quite sure what they want the local authorities to do. But I think that is a really good suggestion, and I think that we need to pull across from all areas of the council to see what we can do going forward. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Councillors, that concludes our Borough Council meeting. I do feel that I have interrupted quite a little bit this afternoon, but as you appreciated, we had quite a bit of business to get through, and I don't think that has lost any of the debate or the business of this Borough Council. So thank you for your understanding.